Hey guys, Tommy Carrigan with Tommy Untamed. We've got a great show coming up. Thank you for watching. And you guys can go in the description. You can find a Substack and all that good shit. Chained Muse, excuse me. And today we are just as we always do. We're catching up on the latest news on Timothy Dillon. Peace be upon his name. And essentially that in less formal terms, that Candace Owens is a psyop CIA whore set out to kill our boy. So those are my words, not David's. But I'm gonna let you maybe set the stage for what we're talking about a little more formally, David. You take it away, sir.
Well, yeah, we were just thinking out loud, or basically, I texted you once I saw that Tim Dillon did a new episode with Candace Owens, who, has obviously become very popular and it has emerged as one of these top new right-wing influencers or whatnot. And for people who haven't heard me speak before, I'm not one of those guys who's like right-wing or left-wing. I'm, much more like Tim Dillon, looking at all sides and looking for the paradoxes.
Yes.
I mean, Candace Owens has a very only recently. I mean, she's like, hey, you know, she's not the only one, but from why do the Jews have so much influence? To was Hitler really, the guy
It
that they
seems
say he was?
relatively recent that she's doing this. It's not.
Yeah, she's but
Yeah,
well,
she's not. Yeah.
that's what's interesting because it's relatively new that a lot of people have suddenly done this, right? And it's that it's not, it goes further. Her recent new expose has to do with, oh, Harvey Weinstein as well. He was falsely accused and whatnot. And I'm, you know, I believe that there could be, I'm open to stories where it turns out what we were told
Yeah.
and the reality on the ground are completely different. Yeah, that's totally fine. But she also does the same thing for, say, Andrew Tate, who she pretends, what he said 10 years ago, I don't care. Or whoever she was asked on Pierce Morgan about Kanye West and all the swastika stuff. And she just like, well, before the show, I had said that, I wasn't going to answer questions about that. I'm not going to backstab people that I know personally. And da-da-da. So she's defending a wide variety of interesting characters, from Hitler to Harvey Weinstein, and you see it's part of a pattern. If you look at Tucker Carlson, let's revisit World War II, and then you see who they bring on, and they still don't cover some of the most glaring ironies of World War II in terms of the role of our own Western intelligence services. In the case of Candace, she's married into a top sort of British aristocratic family.
Yeah.
They're technically the father is not. He's a member of the House of a peer of the House of Lords, but it's not hereditary. They didn't come from that background, but they rose into the top of the top, and you don't do that somewhere in London just because you're like good
Passing
at
by.
business.
Yeah. It's
Like there's other things that happen. So her husband, Candace Owens' husband, is what's his name? Michael Farmer's. Yeah, is George Farmer. Michael Farmer is this British lord's son. They're worth over $100 million, and we'll just put it that way. And she married him after 18 days. He was running. He was the CEO of Parler at the time, and he was chairman or became chairman of the UK Turning Point
hmm
UK instead of USA.
yeah.
So it's just like you have these marriages that suddenly emerge, both literally and metaphorically, in ways that, if we know something about how Western intelligence works, I mean, the fact that this high level British
Yeah. I mean,
lord marries this girl after 18 days, and of course, the thing with them is the father, Michael Farmer, is a born again Christian. You know, they're Christians and whatnot. George Farmer, he's a Christian, and his whole thing about the 18 days is that it was partly like a God thing. That he's like, I had been praying to God, and I hadn't been living a godly life, and I was asking da da da, and then it all just happened. And so you're seeing a lot of people who are suddenly these right wing influencers who are suddenly having this God moment. And that's where it's not that there's not people don't have God moments, but that's if we understand the nature of evil, right? And we see what these kinds of people are willing to overlook. But George Farmer knew Andrew Tate. He said it in interviews way before Andrew Tate actually became some some influencer. And Andrew Tate himself, his father was a former U.S. military air base in London, talented linguist, apparently, and there's this very sketchy, it's not clear why he left or got kicked out. But all these things have parallels to, you know, if we think of Laurel Canyon
Mm-hmm.
and how a lot of the new hippie, you know, George Morris, The Doors,
Frank
Crosby,
Zappa.
Stills, Nash and Young, all these things, Frank Zappa, there were military and intelligence backgrounds for most of these guys. So the kids often go into different programs and stuff. And so back in the day, the influencers were, you know, rock stars. Today, they're podcasters, right? They're independent content creators. So if we have that zoom out, you know, we don't know all the details, but when you see how the landscape is shifting and all these influencers are suddenly having a God moment, and then they start talking about, you know, well, World War II is maybe, and you see where they go with it, right? People have to stop and say, okay, well, what's really happening here? I
What's
feel
the
that's at
driving
least
force? It's from like I had a God moment a couple of years ago, but no, there are also people that use it as a hat, a mask to get into I don't know some milieu. Um, the two things that for me it's yeah questioning the Holocaust, World War II, who are the good guys. That none of that is new in an idea. It's just right. It's not. Um, to me, what's interesting is less of what it is interesting on what it is. It's questioning Jewish power. That's absolutely an important thing to like what it is. But let's regardless of what it is, let's just say it's topic A. We'll just call it whatever. And then knowing if we're going to extrapolate kind of backwards, right? Yeah, Dave McGowan, Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, all these interactions. I think one of the most important thing, and I've talked about this with a lot of people on the show, is like we know what Operation Mockingbird was. It's not a conspiracy. It's real as the day is long to embed journalists or at the very least high level editors in the major news corporations. You don't need the whole company on the payroll. You just need one or two guys to kill a story or just maneuver away from it. And if you can't maneuver away from it, infiltrate it in a way. We know we know that's and it's not surprising. It's of course it's all power goes for propaganda. Of course, the United States is not exempt from that. I look at something like the I don't know 2004 5 kind of Facebook, and then over the next 5 years, kind of Instagram, Snapchat, and then the last 15 years from 2010 till now, the final like hollowing out and I don't know bloodletting of like the big mainstream kind of boomer news, right? CNN, Fox, MSNBC, whatever. Your nighttime, turn it on, the giant, 5-ton desk and the screens behind the Fox. That whole thing. We know that that's going by the wayside. To me, the idea that the intelligence community would not adapt is silly at best. That they did Mockingbird, they ran the show literally and figuratively for decades, And then podcast came along and they're like, we're beat, boys. They got us. No, and you have to admire them from this, even though they're demons. They pivoted, they adapted, they infiltrated. Why would you not get all of these? If anything, not only did you adapt from Mockingbird 1.0 to 2.0, the more you look at it, you realize 2.0 is actually much more effective than 1.0. Because you could look at the nighttime news and they all kind of look the exact same, and everyone always kind of there's the left leaning propaganda, there's the right leaning,
Right.
right? But it's the at night, the guy in the suit doesn't. The podcasts are so unique. You have either it's Rogan or whoever, and from the camera angle to the sponsors to the length of the show to the frequency that they put out. It's not 6 p.m. every night. It's maybe they do a weekly show, maybe they do a daily show, maybe it's Rogan who does 3 hours, maybe it's so and so who does 45 minutes. It is not to sound like a edgy redditor, but it's the illusion of difference and option. That is
Right.
actually a much more nefarious Mockingbird if you can infiltrate that. So what would we look for? When you have the rat, right? Like The Departed, what do? You flush information down and see where it comes out. They do that in
Right.
classified programs as well. They give you in your little compartment. Me and David work on the jet engine of a new fighter jet. They might flush something down like this new jet engine's gonna. It's actually has some similarities to, I don't know, mercury, liquid mercury. They would then. And then they tell the other group it has similarities to gallium. And another group, they tell them that this kind of acts like a mechanical bird. You would take these things that are all believable to the engineers. What you do is you flush them down the different silos. And if you start to see information come out in the wild, maybe you're intercepting Russian communications and you find them talking about, yeah, the Americans have some new mercury based engine, it was Tommy and David, and you and I probably turn up missing. That's how you flush shit out. That's a tried and true
Right.
thing.
Right.
So if you were to look at all these, if we were to test our hypothesis, right, because extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, we can't just say every podcaster is controlled up because
No, of
that's
course.
smooth brained. You would then have to say, regardless of what the topic is, and this is where I come back, whether it's the Jews in World War II or a new jet engine, wouldn't you look for similar things all coming down the gutter at the same time? Case in
Yeah, and of
point.
course, anybody hearing this, right, who's more like, "Oh, you're talking about conspiracies and da
Uh,
da 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 da." Number one, the things we referred to in the past, right, in terms
are
of whether
provable
it's
documents.
Operation Mockingbird or whether it's all the military industrial
It's all proven
complex connections,
declassified shit.
yeah, to the counterculture movement. Sorry. Uh, these things are known. So again, did everything suddenly stop? Did MK Ultra stop? All these things were exposed, and government just said, "Oh, we're gonna have to shut them all down." And in 2025, obviously, people need a bit more discernment. But if anything, there's a term. I don't know if I brought this up last time, but if people take away one thing from this episode, consider a term that this was in the Changing Images of Man document authored by the Stanford Research Institute in the late 1970s, I believe. And they were notorious for bombing surveys and all sorts of different things, psychological warfare, and using experience from Asia and all sorts of bombing and war crimes and stuff committed there to see how you can change behavior, different tactics in warfare. And obviously, reality is a lot of this stuff was brought back and integrated into psychological operations against the domestic population, right? Which is arguably more important for control than these operations against foreign threats. Because as we know today, a lot of what were deemed foreign threats were not foreign threats. A lot of them were created and seeded by, MI6, the CIA, these these intelligence agencies. So the term it goes SPIN, acronym is SPIN, which stands for segmentary polycephalous networks. And that's technically SPN, but they have an I in brackets. and the I stands for ideas. And they say, so segmentary
Oh,
polycephalous ideas network. Polycephalous
what the fuck?
is multi-headed.
I was about to say what? So yeah, encephalopy or your
So the what they're looking at is they're saying if we're in the document, they're looking at what's the best format for top-down control. And traditionally, people think, and this is what was believed at a time, if you look at authoritarian regimes, whether it's Hitler or Franco or all these things, that it's this top-down centralized thing. World government is going to be run from the UN offices, and it's all just going to trickle down as some global government with a few central institutions. But they're saying if you look at the most durable forms of societal makeup, if you will, if you look at like nomadic tribes, they were studying all these archaic tribes and primitive systems of organization where things are very spread out. There's not really, they last over thousands and tens of thousands of years with very little change, and yet it seems all quite haphazard compared to a centralized government, a nation state. Basically, they're saying that the best form of control, of durable, lasting control, is not some centralized top-down system, but it's actually maximum control through maximum decentralization.
if you don't bend, you'll
So
break.
yeah, so they look at the environmentalist movement, right, and they'll observe that the Greenpeace leaders will fight with Friends of the Earth, or they'll with Lynx or whatever, Sea Shepherd or the Sierra Club, right? These things will spin off and fragment. So for people just watching, if you're an environmentalist, right, you think, oh wow, there's all these different groups and they don't agree, they have different ideas, they have different visions. But from the top-down social engineering standpoint, it's a polycephalous process because regardless of the fact that these different movements are clashing and fighting, it acts as one sort of organism, right? It has a life of its own, right?
Mm-hmm.
It has many heads and it moves and morphs in different ways, but it's still top down,
It
promoting the ecological and Malthusian underlying ideas that have been pushed to promote, a deindustrialization of Western civilization, right? Destroying industry, preventing high tech, energy dense power supplies, whether it's nuclear power or all these other advanced forms. A lot of that has been achieved through these social and political movements. So, bottom line is the study of how you create organic movements and these things that are these multi-headed processes that seem independent, right? You have all these independent podcasts. Candace Owens and Jordan Peterson are clashing on, the question of the Jews, or, you got the Daily Wire over here, which is also right-wing total establishment thing, versus a Candace Owens things where she's railing about, how bad the Jews are for America. And Daily Wire is like, well, the Jews are actually made American. And it's like, wow, there's all these fights and these independent people, but top down, is that serving a higher process when it comes to repatterning society and pushing it in the direction that these intelligence agencies want? So if you look at it, I'd say that the repatterning overall towards basically, if there was to sum it up, there was an ARC conference, the Jordan Peterson Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, which has some interesting people, but it's funded by two mega British multimillionaires. It's run by some weird pro ecstatic mystical experience Christians associated with a specific Church of England. They the speakers that they brought in, from Peter Thiel to Douglas Murray and all these people that are apparently anti-establishment, right? They're anti-woke, they're pro-family. I would sum it up as a military industrial complex with family values. None of them go after the central intelligence nodes, the Wall Street, City of London banking
No.
nexus.
Oh.
Uh, they just say, well, there are just these issues. So Eric Weinstein's talking about aliens. Douglas Murray's talking about how, Islam is so bad. He's not going to say that MI6 created, along with the U.S., a lot of the
ISIS.
radical Islamic groups. They're not going to tell you that, right?
They're not gonna.
But that's how you
Yeah.
know they're either very stupid or they know what they're doing, and they're operators, right? So there are operators. Who are the operators? Poke around. See not just what people are saying, but what they're not saying. You know, if you want to have this big revolution, and yet finally, the people being brought in to speak about it, like Douglas Murray was a member of the Henry Jackson Society. Like, this is a hardcore neocon. This is like a Dick Cheney guy. But even more sophisticated, this is like the British side of things, which is more cerebral. It's more of the brains, right? So why are these people? Peter Thiel? I mean, do we even need to say anything? So I think this is where there's a bigger pattern, right, among all these seemingly clashing groups. The process has a life of its own, and I think if we keep in mind a few basic realities about how intelligence agencies work, and what the real issue is in terms of the West and its this financial parasite that is kind of latched on to the vital organs, and is nearly is almost suffocating, right? The Western economic system, and therefore societal conditions are deteriorating. And in this light, people are becoming more spiritual, but more people are having a God moment, understandable and maybe good, but you don't want to lose sight of, well, is there another reason that these establishments are pandering to people about spirituality and God, all the while having all these shady intelligence actors, giving speeches and acting?
segmented segmented polycephalous idea network. It's the first thing that came to mind is just like it's the imagery of like not like a concert venue. It's a venue. It's got a set place. It's got entrance gates where you can check tickets. It's got the big bathrooms. Got the huge whatever rows of seats, normally like a field, and a giant stage that can be outfitted with whatever speakers or show you want. What can you do in that venue? You can host the Rolling Stones. You can host comedy. You can host a conference. You can host a political rally. You might say, yeah, no, see, it's all different. It's not one thing. I would go, yeah, but look, the venue doesn't change. The stage is the same. They alter it slightly, but the gates are in the same spot. They have a parking lot. And they're running that show. They're running that physical structure. And they get money in and they get guests in. They clean it and they get guests out. You could, I mean, I would imagine that like Joe Biden and Trump probably both gave speeches at the same stadiums at some point, maybe years apart, maybe months apart, same
Mm.
stadiums. That's kind of like the idea I'm looking at. It's like let these things flourish under, because too much control. You first of all, the hand gets too noticeable. You see the hand on the scale, and it's also not as it will never be as cunning and brilliant as a naturally arising system. It's much more
Mhm.
cunning and brilliant to track the waves and ride them and guide them where you can. But you don't have to create the wave. You don't have to, you guide it. And you don't have to build every. I don't think you and I know I'm not. I don't think you are. We're not saying Joe Rogan and Andrew Tate are working at, Langley, and they're coming in, what's my message, sir? It's more of
Yeah,
you see these natural flows of views and content dissemination, and you go, how would we shift this where we can into a way that even if we can't control the narrative, how do we make it so whatever narrative it is that they're talking about isn't the bigger narrative, which is like Timmy D, spoiler alert, it's a military industrial financial complex that goes around the world extracting natural resources.
right.
That's the biggest narrative. Everything under that, and so I was just thinking like, but they're also not stupid. They don't say, yeah, just give them any narrative. They'd want to get the most bang for your buck. I'm just trying to think. Maybe we can exercise this. What would, other than like, yeah, they don't like Jews, whatever, like, what would be the reasoning to be revisit World War II now in relation to ginning up support for World War III? And I haven't even thought this through. It's just, it's a note I want, so I'll think about it in real
Right.
time. What would that be? Would it maybe be questioning it to make it not look as catastrophic? Would it maybe make you question it and to go, well, actually, we didn't win World War II. Maybe we need to go finish the job. What things would have us flow into the apex narrative of a military industrial complex empire that goes around the world extracting natural resources from the earth to fortify their power? I'm just, I wonder how easily that my, and I think it's probably something like we didn't win. Now let's go finish the job. And now you get a bunch of dudes going like, I'll go join the army if we means we can go get those goddamn Jews. Yeah, I could see that working. I could see that working.
Well, they need to find I mean, historically, again, if people are like, "Oh, you guys are talking about conspiracies," and
Don't
this
don't even be
people,
concerned with those people. They're not. They're
but
done. They're
but what's funny? No, but what's funny is that okay, if you go back to World War II, the problem is sometimes people don't know some of the basics just because there are these official stories. But I mean, Hitler was again George Bush's grandfather, Prescott
Prescott
Bush,
Bush,
made a loan to the Nazi Party through Brown
Brown
Brothers
Brown Brothers
Harriman. Brown
Harriman.
Brothers,
Yeah,
right? These were
we funded
banking.
them.
Sorry,
We funded them. Wall
these
Street
were Harriman
rose Nazi
banking.
Germany.
These were Harriman banking interests among other Wall Street pro eugenics uh, policy supporters, pro eugenics families. I mean, the Hitler modeled his eugenics policy on the early eugenics policies in the West, right? In the United States, in Canada. And so Hitler had a lot of support from the establishment right up to the British royal family. And people always, this also always gets obscured, but no, they were, Hitler had the backing of the royal family. You know, you have that famous, the Sun had put this out. That's Murdoch, right? That these families fight each other. These top families, but they had ran their royal highnesses because it was the young Queen Elizabeth when she was like 7 doing the Hitler salute with the family. The whole family was doing it, and they're like, ah,
Yeah,
what?
okay.
And they try to explain it away. But so there was always a support for in World War II within the establishment for that, and the Jews was a good scapegoat to justify what had been done to Germany in order to basically destroy its economy with the Treaty of Versailles, which was organized top down from the City of London, again Wall Street, Bank of England,
Woodrow
usual
Wilson.
suspects.
Yeah.
So there are usual suspects, and it's once people do this enough, you start to see that you can go back to these things and you can trace them back to earlier institutions and see how that also coalesces into a clearer picture of world history. But so you got to blame somebody, right? So it's almost funny that in the same way you got a lot of the Cold War anti-communism lines that are just they're a bit dopey. You know, they're not. It's just a lot of us versus them, and without and like China's the aggressor, when it's just crazy to think that China or Russia
They haven't
have
dropped a
been aggressive towards the
hasn't
West during
hasn't
this.
sorry, hasn't China not dropped a bomb in like 45 years?
Well, again, people's
Mm.
propaganda addled brains, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot, but it's so when you look at that from the top down, they have to distort the reality. They need to look for bad guys, and the West is obviously in trouble. The communism card, the Jews card, these were exactly the cards used back then. So is there maybe a parallel between the people playing these cards today and the people playing those cards back then, right? As a working hypothesis, we don't need
Yeah.
to be committed to this. But then if you look at it, and coming full circle now, 18 days after they meet, George Farmer, this supposedly Christian British lord, decides to marry Candace Owens, and not long after that, she starts going on these crazy Jewish conspiracy tirades and
Mm.
popularizing this. Um, Along with Tucker's doing all sorts of weird things, right? He talks about aliens as well, under the ground, under the sea,
Wasn't his dad CIA?
demonology.
Wasn't Tucker's father in the CIA? I might be wrong on that.
I don't know exactly, but
I don't
these are like, yeah,
remember.
these are very, very established families in the same way that, yeah, the
Could
Michael
be.
Farmer and all that in London. So we don't need to be conspiracy theorists to just say, hey, we know a bit of the important snippets in history, right? Nobody needs to be have spent 20 years in the academy to know this stuff. It should be basic knowledge, right? We should learn this thing. We should know these things as part of basic history. So if anything, the only thing we're saying different is that, well, this is just basic history that we weren't taught. And if people even knew basic history, they wouldn't fall for a lot of these psyops, which, as sophisticated as they seem, they really rely on people just not knowing basic facts.
I just found the article. Sorry, I wasn't trying to be rude and
Oh,
play
it's fine.
with my. So I didn't find anything on everything. Is I'm sure I can look into it more. Tucker CIA, everything at the top is just episodes he's done. Um, Putin mocks over his field, so he failed to join the CIA. But there's something I sent you that I saw yesterday, tweeted by Elon. It's the invisible puppet masters, AI's disturbing new role in shaping minds, and they talked about how what was it? The University of Zurich, I guess, just concluded a study that they were, or it was a real time, like in the field study operation, whatever you want to call it, to not just your normal bot farms to botted likes and stuff, but actually to go into Reddit threads and and target. I think they targeted like 300 users on topics purely for the goal of could you change their opinion, regardless of what I think it was like. I don't know. It was like environmental laws in Michigan or so. It was something like inconsequential, but it was like, can we do this? And you had
What was
these.
a They said they, but you, sorry, what would they went to find them for what?
They took like 300 or 3,000 bots and they went into Reddit, and it wasn't just your normal. There's like botted likes where like you just have fake likes on Twitter. It wasn't that. It was
Yeah.
like interactive bots, but it was like I guess a new level, a new generation, whatever of bots, and it was to go in. And the goal was to interact with real people and change their minds on a subject. The subject
Oh,
itself was inconsequential. I think it was
oh,
something like
interesting.
it wasn't about like did the Jews fake the holiday. No, no, no. It was. I think it was whatever the. Hey, do you like the color blue? Whatever the fuck
Could
it
we grow
was.
basil instead of raspberries?
They went in and each bot, when they would interact with someone, because they're super advanced now, they would look at all of the users' post history, their wording, their sentence structure, things they liked, different subreddits, and each comment was curated for that one person. And the said that compared to traditional intelligence methods, this was roughly 10 times more effective.
Interesting.
So that's what the University of Zurich did, and that's what they've told us they did. and that is because we're hearing about it, definitionally not classified.
Right.
What in Christ's name is going on? Who had what has the NSA unleashed? MI6 unleashed to the point where they might be on Mockingbird 3.0. You and I are just warming up to 2.0, and they
It
might
could
be
be
like,
10.0.
yeah,
We could
they're
be,
like oh, that old podcast, that's yesteryear. That's so 2010. We're on that internet theory that like 99% of users you interact with aren't real. It's so then you have to ask yourself. So we can't know that because that's all classified. We could spend our whole lives trying to figure it out what it is. We won't figure that out. What we can do is go, well, what is the effect? And I think the effect always flows back upwards to the ultimate narrative. It's a military, industrial, financial intelligence complex going around the world extracting natural resources. That,
yeah, and
yeah,
like that's yes. Sometimes just remembering the basic simple facts. I think, regardless of how sophisticated it becomes, though, that's the thing.
it kind of
When
doesn't
you're dealing with
matter.
the question of truth, it comes down to just inconvenient truths
Yeah,
and being able to not get bogged down by all the feedback, right? Because these are all feedback loops. The model for all this is cybernetic feedback loops, right? Okay, their bots are more sophisticated and are have more advanced opinion making or opinion changing abilities. But at the end of the day, it's all based on sort of flooding people with feedback loops, right? Amplifying the profiles that they want to amplify, shadow banning, de amplifying the ones that they don't. And when something starts to pick up that is maybe not what they want to be promoting, right? When independent thinkers or something starts to go viral, right, they have to calibrate, they have to maneuver, but ultimately they're just going to they want to shadow ban, they want to reduce the reach of the things that they don't want to spread, and they want to amplify the things that support their ideas. So at the end of the day, the simple reality is still point out the inconvenient truths, right? Point out that, like, Elon Musk, I mean, it's see he's sharing that, but then when you look at who Elon Musk is, from the whole family background, Technocracy Inc., to the transhumanist stuff, like, it's real. You know, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, number
PayPal
one, these
Mafia.
guys, they're this is the military
I was
industrial
gonna say,
complex.
you didn't even need to go back to Elon's family.
This is
He
the military.
alone is the single biggest, not as a company, but as a person, he alone is the single biggest benefactor of the DoD by dollars. He's not he's not kind of involved. He's the single biggest. He is the single biggest. Space is the ultimate high ground. He's the single biggest contractor for the NRO and the NGA, the National Geospatial, and now the Space Force. These aren't like it's not again, it's not like, hey, he was a contractor for the DoD. It's like, yeah, but there's like 3.5 million. I don't know, maybe David's technically a contractor. You're like, yeah, I delivered plywood somewhere. Now technically I work for Grumman. And I get that. No. He is the single biggest benefactor. He's at the right hand of the president.
Yeah.
Like,
And at the same time, though, right, we're not saying this to a healthy dose of cynicism is good, right?
we're
But
not
at the
saying
same
anything.
time,
We're just laying out the facts and go make
right.
of that what you will, or at least know that when you're making decisions. Heaven's Harvest Prepper Food. 72 servings per pail, 25 years shelf life. I've had the owner Clayton on the show before. He's a God fearing, America loving patriot. Get one of these, get a couple of them, throw them in your basement. It's good to have it, not need it, than to need it and not have it. If you don't want to do that, you can get their seeds. You can plant your own garden. So you don't even have to keep buying them. You can just get the goods and start your own. Or you can even get freeze dried fruits and vegetables like bananas, apples, strawberries, and raspberries. They support the show. It's an honest product. It's a good safety measure to have, and they keep my show free for you. So I'd implore you guys to please go to heavensharvest.com, use the link in the description, promo code TPC. Axios Fitness Coaching is a premium resource for holistic strength and conditioning services. Axios is best known for the Training Club, capital T, capital C, an exclusive community that prioritizes accountability, technique, diet, and nutrition. Everything you need to do to take action against the decay of the modern world. Whether you're looking to improve your physique, build strength, or just take care of your health and fitness, Axios will provide you with a solution that is effective and simple to execute. All you need to do is complete the intake survey, and you can see if you're a good candidate for the training club or any other of the services. And it's going to sponsor the show. So, one company falls off, another one arises. So, if you guys like the show, you want to work out, throw the show a couple shekels. Go take the survey. Thank you so much, guys.
Higher ultraviolet exposure is associated with lower mortality. The United Kingdom is a high latitude and low sunlight country. Researchers there collected data on over 360,000 participants in a study of UV exposure via solarium use. When compared with non-users, solarium users had 15% risk lowered of all-cause mortality, 23% lower risk of cardiovascular mortality, 14% lower risk of cancer mortality, and a 12% lower risk of non-cardiovascular, non-cancer mortality. In other words, all other causes. Quoting the researchers, our study adds to the growing evidence that the benefits of UV exposure outweigh the risks in low sunlight environments. A link to the original publication is available in the box below the video. Get some UV light this winter. Immerse yourself in the tranquility of the blue. Visit a Blue Room soon. www.blueroom.com.
But I also think like it's all about bigger picture, right? Because people sort of if we get too dialed into the what's happening on the right or what's happening on the left, or even what's just happening in American politics, we lose sight of the fact that there's a global dynamic which is changing rapidly, right? Like the Western system really is on the decline. And like the way I think about it, what's needed for Western civilization to actually be revitalized, we're talking about this. I talk about this in terms of, again, being clear on if what the Western civilization is to survive in some kind of recognizable form or rediscover its best traditions. That the West has emerged from dark ages many times before, and the odds were there were a lot less back then than they are today, all things considered. If you look at how the Renaissance emerged, and it's just a few people sort of introducing some very powerful concepts and organizing others, and there are diplomatic overtures. People are also they're doing multiple things. They're not just they're philosophers, they're diplomats, they're artists, they're mathematicians. Petrarch was a poet, but he was also doing diplomacy for the Vatican. He was doing all sorts of things, right? They were promoting culture. So there's no simple way, but if you look back in history, there are always precedents for this. And so my approach is always we're thinking we want to zoom out, right? Again, yeah, like you said, we're not telling people this or it's this way or it's that way. But if we keep doing that zoom out, zoom out, zoom out, and get accustomed to detaching ourselves from the immediate situation so that we can assess things properly, it's not all doom and gloom. You can discern the fake conspiracies from the real ones, right? The conspiracies that are put out to sort of basically break people's brains, whether it's super fundamental crazy superstitious demonology and gnostic things like what Tucker Carlson's doing, where at the end he'll say, oh, by the way, he'll go through this whole thing and he's like, but actually it's all in God's hands, so I don't worry. He's not saying that because he's saying because he basically the whole idea of keying in on people's end times or fundamentalist ideas to spiritually immobilize them. to get themselves to remove themselves from the process. That's also a thing, you know. So there's all these tricks, and we're just saying zoom out, get accustomed to changing the lens and playing around with these things, and then it becomes easier to discern, and it's less demoralizing because we can encounter ideas and we can figure out how to, or narratives, and to take them apart and remember our basic facts, right? Not lose sight of basic history, basic truth. That's more interesting in
Mm.
the least. As we said last time, you know, even if nothing changes, you go back to the office tomorrow and you just keep processing claims, this is still way more interesting than what the CBC or, you know, Fox News, or even a lot of these these podcast influencers who, you know, they seem kind of cool, but they're putting out misleading content, right?
That's slop.
They're operators. So I think this is more interesting. We're looking at how illusions are actually created, how you remove illusions, and what people do with that in their lives. I mean, possibilities are endless, but I'll take removing illusions any day over some sophisticated, you know, circus, psyop, Mockingbird
The harsh,
machine. I don't care how many good movies they make.
yeah,
I don't care.
the harsh, brutal reality is ultimately, I believe, always more satisfying than a fake dream. Like the Truman Show, like yeah, sure, it's probably, you know, it is there is pleasure and ease into being in like the Matrix kind of. They do, hey dude, go to work, watch that. Like I get it, I totally get. I like tried to force myself into that like once or twice in college. I like tried to like watch sports, like watch movies, like go to the bar. I was like consciously, I was like, I want to be a retard. I want to plug in and I want to care about this football game. And I tried and it didn't work, and I'm deeply upset it didn't. But like I tried and like I do get it, but
Right.
there's something much deeper to, no matter how painful it is, there is something deep. What you said, there is something deeper on a much more core level about shattering a delusion and knowing the truth. And it'll drive you insane. A lot of cases it kills people, but there is something a little more. You're on a little more solid ground. It's less sandy. It's less of a boat. You feel more like you're standing on a, you know, piece of pavement. And it might be a brutal reality, but there is something about not being too cast to and fro in like the howling winds of propaganda and ideology. And you always will be to a degree, and you always got to go deeper and deeper and deeper. But I do think that is, it's impressive and it's interesting in the almost mainstream schizophrenic break that this country and this world is having. It's like we're all now going, yeah, you know what? I hear the voices too. Is it the Jews? Is it the Chinese? Is AI running the world? Do you think Elon's an alien? Do you think Trump's working with Putin? Is Trump actually was Biden a clone? There is something kind of a little nicer that we're all like, you know what? We can't just point at the guy and laugh anymore. We're all like, more than I've ever had in my life in the last like year or two. I have like conversations with people who would never touch these things. Be like, what's the craziest thing you believe? And you know, I'll tell them, and I'm like, you, and they'll be like, I think Biden was a robot, and I'm like, and I love that. I love hearing that like the average person is like kind of breaking.
As Tim Dillon put it, I believe pedophile blackmail cults control the government and the lizards, and I'm a centrist.
And I'm a centrist. And that's centrist now. That's centrist now. I believe that satanic pedophile lizards control the government, and that's
That's
centrist.
moderate. That's actually moderate. It's fairly
It honestly
moderate
kind of
today.
is. Like,
So I would just say, I mean, again, today it's very popular. People rail. There's the people having a God moment, and a lot of it, there's always some kind of idea of a mystical experience, having a mystical experience or transformative experience. And I just say that the most mystical and transformative experience is removing one's illusions.
yeah,
You know what I mean? So people are being sold all these different ways of transcending and having a mystical experience. There's no more mystical or magical experience than sort of having a serious visceral encounter with the truth, right? Which requires humility
uh,
and honesty. And that's a lot in the long run. That's probably a lot more, that's it's lasting and of value, even if it doesn't give you the same high as taking a heroic dose of mushrooms like
sure.
Jordan Peterson or something, or Joe Rogan and blasting off to hyperspace. It actually lasts, and you can actually be more productive and creative with that. But as well, what was the second thing you were saying? Well, yeah,
Like
I
the
almost think
schizophrenic break at large.
right. So I don't want to go all Langian, R.D. Lang, who popularized the divided self and all that. But yeah, I'd seen a video where even, for example, Marina Abramovich was commenting that she thought what was happening with Trump was great because it's sort of turning everything upside down. And she thinks that she was saying that's good, which is from that Tavistockian schizophrenic psychoanalytic lens. Yeah, you need to break people's brains. Like you said, people are like, I'm hearing the voices too. The lizards and the, blackmail cult, that's just par for the course. That's where people now become open to fundamentally new ideas, where you have this psychic break, right? Where people really lose their minds. And that's how repatterning works,
No, it
right?
is.
All the
Yeah.
cults, you have to break people down emotionally, you have to disarm them.
Boot camp.
And
It's same thing.
yeah, and you can do that again. They looked at like World War II style torture and sleep deprivation and all the different ways that you could break people's personalities through physical abuse and trauma, but they also saw that using language, right, hypnosis, and just the right, if you can create traumatic events in people's minds such that they're going to live through trauma without actually having the trauma, right? So there was a lot of that with the woke culture and like who's under attack, whose life is threatened, where once the threshold for one's very existence being threatened, right? The groups, the minorities, whatnot, like everybody's just being killed, right? It's just like a trans genocide, it's a this genocide, it's a that genocide. Then it's like you're creating a trauma state for people, even though the trauma is not there. That's how you repattern people. So that's being done on all sides. And again, that's where truth, seemingly simple thing, certain inconvenient facts or inconvenient realities, that can keep people from, going over the edge, right? From actually having that psychic break. So it seems like a small thing. But at the end of the day, the way people heal and find closure and sanity is by remembering sort of a few basic simple truths that from day to day with all the chaos, right, with all the feedback and the noise, we forget certain basic things. But I think that's the basis. Right now there does need to be a, rather than reset, I say renaissance. That's my whole series on Substack, reset or renaissance. And yeah, but a renaissance usually involves going back to basics, rediscovering the foundations of our civilization, of our of our world, how it was built up and building, engaging in those traditions. All this other stuff, a lot of this more super sophisticated psyops, it's ultimately, it's artificial.
It's fake and gay.
It's not going to last. It's just their illusions. They're going to fade, and if people just fall in love with those, they're just falling in love with things that will pass.
Yeah,
And
I had a thought when you were talking about Maria Abramovich, who is like at the most like simple immediate. It's like that's the crazy Satanist woman on the left who takes the pictures with the goat heads, and people on the right are like, "That's proof of Pizzagate." Yeah, it might be, but it's interesting to hear her say this is good because it's flipping everything upside down. I mean, I think it's good to, like 2021, 2022, seeing the Twitter files, seeing DHS, FBI backdoors in a Facebook and Instagram, Zuckerberg talking about Biden censorship on Rogan a couple months ago, but then also like 4chan, everyone validating their hunch that it was like a right-wing honeypot. And then like we know Reddit is, and you go, yeah, they're both. No one has an original thought or something that isn't being guided. Those are all, you can either go deeper into the hole and hide from it, or you can look at it, really, I mean, the allegory of the cave, and go, oh, I was making fun of their shadows. My sacred cow is also a shadow. And that is more of a real psychedelic cleansing than any acid. To go, oh, that was fake. Oh shit. And it made me think when you said like, this is how you reset minds, be it, the centrist view of that there's satanic pedophile cults that sacrifice children in front of other children to clean their minds to turn them into assassins, a la
right.
Tim Dillon and Raymond Kump, peace be upon their names, or just any trauma. You could say 9/11, or you losing my brother to suicide. Any trauma, getting dumped, any trauma, to subjectively is where you see massive growth, right? And so it's not always a bad thing, but it had me thinking like, it might be that as we're circling the drain, and it might not even just be it could be the American Empire and the 250-year cycle. It could just be, in general, centralized control, although Occam's razor would say it's the former, that they're looking, it's good that Trump's turning the system upside down because everyone's having this like trauma break, and then maybe we can instill a new system in it. Every concentric circle of trauma breaking, you could say Pearl Harbor or Great Depression, Pearl Harbor, Gulf of Tonkin, Kennedy, 9/11, 08 financial crisis, Trump, COVID. As the big trauma breaks are happening more and more, the power elite are sort of backing themselves up almost onto like an isthmus or a peninsula, because we're reaching a point where they're getting to the bottom of the barrel of things that you can break people from. The final one is going to be, no centralized control matters, no narratives matter, everything is fake except what you see. So it's like a weird way, and like taking out a loan to pay for a loan to pay for a loan, you can keep bailing yourself out until finally the entire system crashes. And will we see that in our lifetimes? Occam's razor would say no, but it's like, by the time you hear people like Marina Abramovich saying that Trump is a good thing because it's turning everything upside down, we're kind of zoomed all the way out. We're like the scroll wheel isn't going anymore, and it's like, well, if everyone realizes that the left and right are fake, and then maybe we can do a world war with Ukraine, and we're reaching this point to where like you almost overplay your hand, and nothing is real. And then the final trauma break would be the one in which you don't allow the new system inserted in. You would go, after every trauma break, there's a big change in operating system. 9/11, Patriot Act, war in the Middle East. 2008, TARP. Trump comes in, the intelligence community is never wrong, and they're fighting against Trump. COVID, we got to lock everything down. As the trauma breakings are getting more and more intense, there's only so much free memory to establish a new operating system. And the final trauma break will be, and then after Trump take control, now the new system, people are going to be like, no, because I've had a lot of once in a lifetime things happened several
Right.
times in my life. I mean, I'm 34. What were mine? 9/11, 08, I guess Trump getting in office, COVID, and I don't know, almost seeing a president assassinated last year. Like the dumpings are getting faster. A big one will be aliens when they pull that shit. But I'm having these like once in a lifetime things that normally, if you did once in a lifetime, you could get away with it. Because by the time the person starts to get keen to it, they die. They're old. They're in their 80s. They're 90. Our grandparents might have finally questioned Pearl Harbor towards the very end, but then by the very
Right.
end, it was like, it. When these things
It's
happen that are supposed to happen once a lifetime, when these happen every 4 to 5 years, it eventually there's going to be an immune response, and it could just be the final.
right.
It's all gay. Unplug the internet. Go live in the woods, but you won't have medicine. I don't care. Truth is seeing clouds. Like it might not be. I don't know. And maybe I'm too optimistic. Maybe they're one step ahead of us, and there's some hypercomputer silicon antichrist that's going to take over the world. And I'll go, I was wrong. I don't know. I'll
Well,
shut up.
I think that's actually a great point and probably a good note to almost wrap things up.
Sure.
But yeah, the magic again, I think this is psychology of evil here applies where there's a certain hubris, right? Once you get used to relying on magic, right, to sort of trick people and to woo people, that only you can only trick people so many times. And I mean, this was the simple Abraham Lincoln said it, right? You can fool most of the people most of the
Most
time,
time.
but you can't fool all the people all the time. Putting sort of Neuralink in everybody's brain and think you're just going to chip everybody and you're going to build this new Elysium, blast off from
Yeah.
planet Earth and create this new Martian technocracy or whatever the heck, right? These independent city states and whatnot. And it's all just going to work out. And you can just lie to people the whole way and pull the rug from under them right until the end. History shows that no, at a certain point, yeah, there are breaks, but yeah, let's not forget that the bad guys, if you will, the transhumanists, these are very utopian, delusional people at the end of the day. And yeah, have a lot of resources,
Mm-hmm.
but there's the magic wears off, right? You can only trick people so many times. So that's where it's like it's time to just get back to basics and like the basic truths that people are realizing about whether it's the importance of family and community to just having basic, aren't there like blackouts now in Spain and Portugal, like
Yeah.
maybe it wasn't a good idea to just go for this Malthusian death cult renewable energy thing where we can't power a first world economy anymore
Yeah.
and we've had to rely. So okay, yeah, it's good. We should rebuild our factories and our productive capacities, right? And we should have long-term programs for 25, 50-year programs where we actually build things. That's how it used to be. And if people actually at least are in touch with the basics, then yeah, again, the magicians, I think that's at the end of the day, that's the real issue. People just have to don't mind the magicians and their tricks, right? You know it's fake, right? Maybe you don't know how they do all their tricks, but at the end of the day, better off. No, thank you. No psychic break. Let's just get back to the simple truth, and make it to the other side
Do you,
of the.
and we'll wrap it up, but do you think there's something to self sabotage? Like I know in my own life, I've been sober for about a year and a couple months, but I know a lot of times, for me, it was never hangovers. It was I had a concussion 3 years ago, and every time after it, I'd have a panic attack. And I have to be very important to say, not anxiety. I mean, panic attack would go like They'll literally go to like the hospital or like a clinic or something, and sometimes they'd give me a controlled substance like a Xanax. Sometimes they'd just give me like a Benadryl, but it would be so bad that and like the panic would eventually subside, and after a panic attack, you feel like you just ran a marathon. You'd be like, oh, and finally, like tomorrow's a new day, and I need to get up and kind of clean up the apartment a little bit and shave. And
Mhm.
I was so grateful to just get back to doing a podcast on Monday that eventually I started looking at it and I went, how much of me even likes drinking, or do I like the depths because they're so bad that the very thing I was bored of by Friday of last week, my work week, I now yearn for. And you almost wonder,
Right.
is it at the very top? Are the utopianists saying we got to have like a limited nuclear exchange, 40, 50 million dead over 5 years, because then everyone will just be so happy to get back to a 9 to 5. You almost wonder if it's like a self sabotage at the highest level. Just like make it so bad. Great Depression, Dust Bowl, World War II. You 1, 2, 3. You just make it hell on earth that people come back and they go, "I'm so grateful for this 1,200 square foot house and a white
Right.
picket fence."
Right. Well, that's the danger. And yeah, but I'd say the bad guys are capable of the same thing, right? Because well, people tend to think, yeah, self-sabotage is just this, personal, or like, yeah, it's always just me self-sabotaging. But as Tim Dillon pointed out, right, if you look at a lot of the establishment, their kids. Look at George Soros is his kid. If you've seen this guy speak, what's his name?
Alex.
Alex Soros can barely put a few sentences together. At zero, none of the intellect of the father, and you can just go. I saw the Rothschild, the heir of the Rothschild. I mean, looks like a misfit
Yeah.
kid in like
This
corduroy
is
or something, and you're just like, what is this?
this is the
Um,
this is like the Black Pope. This is the guy that runs the world.
yeah, so it's yeah, there's a lot. There's self-sabotaging uh, a bit everywhere, and that's why I guess yeah, the humility route is really the only way out, right? Yeah, sure. Like yeah, we're all capable of illusions, and how long we last in those illusions, right? Or do we, shatter with them? That's I mean that's why I wrote the dialogue Daedalus, right? Does man we talked about this at a previous show. Does man always have to fly too close to the sun? And you said you do and you don't. And yeah, maybe that's fair enough. And I guess part of it is, you know, first got to talk about it, right? You can't
Yeah.
really solve a problem till you put a name on it. And some of these problems are more difficult. But yeah, a bit of time to ponder. And then, you do your daily stuff. We all have our daily routines that, yeah, if I don't have a daily routine
I'll kill
after a while, right,
myself.
it gets hard. But,
I'll put a
I
shotgun
like
in my mouth.
I like my,
I
routine, right?
love
Yes.
it.
So, at the end of the day, yeah, does man always have to fly too close to the sun? Do we have to press the big red button and go over the cliff every time? I mean, there's plenty of stories of people. I've heard great stories. People who, were ready to just end it all. And, what realization did they have?
Sure.
These kinds of stories matter. You have all sorts of dark stories, but where people sort of make it into the light. So again, people have to make a choice, at least to a certain point, of what they expose themselves to, right? What we expose ourselves to, and our habits, our routines. Like, yeah, you can't just have motivation if all your habits are pretty detrimental to
Yeah.
any kind of lasting motivation, right? Like that's not how things work. So some of it's practical, some of it's spiritual, right? Like some of it's psychological, some of it's diet, bro, have some sauerkraut. You know, get your
Your gut
guts not
biome.
working well, so the bugs are eating your brain or something. You know, like some of it's just basic. I like that idea that a lot of it is just the simple truths that, yeah, it is easy to forget these things as we're going about the whole our days, but that's why you have things like meditation, prayer, time for reflection, right? And then you go into the world with that, and you just let the rest, the magic, happen on its own.
I was gonna say, yeah, no, for I did the self sabotage for I don't know, seemingly like 2 years, and then I was like, well, I don't know what I would do without it, and coming up on what 16 months sober, and I would say, no, you can eventually still progress without the self sabotage. It takes a little longer, but you actually can. And then finally, I would say I think the kind of the best part of all of this is everything where is it Mockingbird 3.0, 10.0? Is this a reversal? Is this a self engineered world war? It just made me think of the quote, the universe is under no obligation to make sense to you. Like it might be
Hmm.
that not a single one of the loose ends you and I are discussing are ever tied up in any coherent form in our lives or our grandkids' lives. Like if we could go forward to 2250, we might look at it and be like, well, how did this wrap up? What about nothing? It just might be like, yeah, like it didn't make sense. It doesn't. Like they could like declassify like a fusion power plant tomorrow, and then we just have world peace. And we're like, I thought there was gonna be like a final showdown and blue beam and the like. None of it has to make sense. Was that another quote? The difference between fiction and reality is fiction has to make sense.
Haha,
The plot has to make sense.
haha, that's funny. Who said
I
that?
don't know who said it. It's a great one.
It's funny.
That's kind of the
Yeah,
best part. Is like none of this has to come out in the wash. Like
right.
like to the universe, like one, yeah, 1 plus 1 equals a tomato. Like it doesn't have to mold to us. Um, but yeah, let's we'll wrap it up. Everybody listening, please go in the description. Please go follow the Substack, and yeah, dude, as always, it's a pleasure talking to you. I like talking to you. I always feel a little more peace. I don't know if it's dissociation or peace, but I feel something after I talk to you, and I enjoy it. So I'll continue using it.
No, it's always nice, man. It's a pleasure, and yeah, we'll be. Something tells me there's going to be plenty unfolding in relatively short order, so
Oh,
I'm sure we'll be.
oh
Yeah,
god,
we'll get back at it
oh god.
soon.
Was Tim Dillon on Fox News last night?
Sorry,
Was Tim Dillon on Fox News last night? A
I
girl, a
don't.
girl I'm friends with who loves Tim Dillon. I just saw on her Snapchat before this episode. She took a picture of
Maybe
her
he was on
TV, and
Gutfeld.
I don't know. He was on Fox News, like wearing a flat bill. I
I'm
don't.
gonna have to check that out. I mean,
They
I'm usually on top of these things,
they
but
better not co.
yeah.
They better not co-opt our boy. They better not. I'll kill myself if they take Tim Dillon. All right, David. Let's wrap this shit up. Stay in touch. We'll do another show sooner than later. As always, man. I love talking to you. I appreciate the time out of your day. You're a brilliant individual and you're a good man. Thank you, sir.